Well, it's 10 o'clock and this is the Jersey Chamber of Commerce, and this is our first hustings of many that we're doing with the parish of St Saviour. I'm delighted that we have an array of candidates who will be giving you their manifesto in just a few minutes' time. For those of you who are watching, thank you. There is a Q&A box at the bottom. You can forward your questions into that and we'll do our best to weave those into the conversation that we're about to have. We're on a limited time, so I won't delay too much more. Just to note that this is recorded, and that does mean that all of the candidates know it's recorded, but also that we can share this with viewers that want to go to the Jersey Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel tomorrow, and it will also go to all of our chamber members who have indicated an interest to find out what our candidates have to say. So without further ado, we shall move straight away to the 2-minute round, the 2-minute round from each of our candidates to give an insight into why they're standing, their manifesto. We'll start in no particular order, but in my top left of my screen is Malcolm Ferry. So Malcolm, we'll start with you. So Malcolm, your 2 minutes worth.
Thank you. Hello, everybody watching live and on catch up. My name's Malcolm Ferry. You probably know me from Citizens Advice, where I spent 11 glorious years helping out members of the public with their everyday issues. Prior to that, I briefly spent some time in the finance industry and then went on to the civil service. Perhaps the part of my career that I'm most proud of is when I led the island's pandemic response through the community task force. I'm currently at Headway Jersey on a part-time basis. I think most of my interaction with Chamber has been during the time that I spent on the Employment Forum, where I served for 10 years and ended up as Deputy Chairman for that organisation. And each year, or twice or 3 times a year sometimes, we would hear from hospitality, from agriculture, from the Institute of Directors, and we would consult openly on minimum wage issues, on employment law issues, but usually with particular regard to small business. Small business is the lifeblood of our island, and whilst it is fantastic to have modern fit-for-purpose legislation, which leads to a modern fit-for-purpose workforce, small business has to be regarded in that equation. Speaking recently to members of the tourism industry, I was really interested to hear their challenges. But I think there are great opportunities for Jersey in the coming years. I think if you look at the travel disruption over the weekend with people trying to get away and then trying to get back for half term, one of the beauties of Jersey is it is different, but it is very accessible. And if you remember that old strap line, nearer to France, closer to home, maybe we need to reinvigorate that and call it nearer to paradise, but easier to get to. There are great opportunities in the coming years for tourism in Jersey. But of course, none of that will make any sense without staffing and without staff who have got the skills to do the task. So we've already seen that there is an imbalance here. We've got 1,300 jobs available and we've got 800 people who are actively seeking work. It's clear that that matching exercise is wrong because there are not enough people who have the required skills to do the job. Digital skills is one thing, and of course that's really important because what job doesn't involve digital skills of some sort? But we also need forward-thinking leaders. We need forward-thinking states members who are going to carry forward new ideas, fresh thinking, and get the assembly to catch up with what's happening in the workplace. Of course, all of this is okay. I think I've just had the signal from Murray that I've just got a couple of seconds left. So I'll wrap that up and pass over to the next candidate.
Thank you, Malcolm. That's very generous of you to note that. Thank you very much indeed. I should say we've had apologies from Louise Dublé, Sophie Walton and Suzanne Webb for today, just in case you're looking on the screen and wondering where they might be. From that, we'll move to our next candidate and we'll go to Jonathan Channing. Jonathan, you've got your 2 minutes. You're on mute, by the way.
No, thank you very much, Murray. So I'm Jonathan Channing and I'm standing for Deputy of St Saviour. I have based my manifesto actually on a triple bottom line approach. So looking at how do we achieve a vibrant economy? How do we maintain a sustainable future for Ireland? And how do we ensure a prosperous community? So my approach to my manifesto has been very much in line with balancing the social, economic, and sustainability aspects. I believe that there's going to be a number of policies this election which are going to need to be developed in line with industry and the interests of industry. So we will have to engage with chamber and other bodies. I think one of these will be the living wage. It needs to be measured and it needs to be done in a way that it does not overburden certain industries and businesses. Now, my manifesto, just to get onto some of the core commitments, I'm passionate about a rethink of education to deliver better educational outcomes for students with SEN needs. I think it's imperative we do this. I'm very keen on an eco-incentive program for Jersey to be world leading in its approach to how we combat climate change and how we can then be the thought leaders and almost that world economic study for the greater world on creating that dashboard for sustainable life. I'm very interested in construction and looking at actually how are we going to achieve more sustainable methods of construction for our island, reduce the cost of housing, and also look at how we put in place shared equity schemes backed by developers where we can actually really start to get more than just the government sort of backing shared equity. Let's get it back into with the developers. And of course, increased access to services for diagnostic and mental health. Well, thank you very much. And there was something about the aging population, which was hospital home healthcare. So I'm
going to stop you there, Jonathan,
yes.
And we'll come back and we can pick up maybe some of those topics as we go forward. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to move without too much ado on to Mary. Mary O'Keefe.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having a listen. I'm an experienced businesswoman. I've owned my own businesses, a relocation company for high net worth individuals, a previous dental surgery, and an arts festival. And I was NED at the Opera House for 10 years, and currently I'm a trustee of the Jersey Cheshire Homes and vice chair of Crime Stoppers Jersey, brilliant charities. Now, keeping our economy strong is vital to Jersey's success. Currently, finance sector activities account for about 40% of economic activity and 70% of our tax revenue. The prosperity of the people of Jersey depends on its economy. And given the very small size of Jersey, in practice, this means producing goods and services that are sold in other jurisdictions, the process being used to import goods and services consumed within the island. In the foreseeable future, finance centre activities will continue to provide a large proportion of the employment and the tax revenue on which the island depends. But the continued success of this industry cannot be taken for granted. The Alliance vision is very much in line with the New Perspectives, which was the document produced by members of the Jersey's Economic Council. And we really adopt its recommendations wholeheartedly. And then promoting the entrepreneurial culture, embracing the importance of a new economy being created globally through technology, artificial intelligence, data, and regeneration from an infrastructure and quality of life perspective are essential. Jersey must aspire to and achieve the highest level of education and skills. And the government's role should primarily be to facilitate an environment in which entrepreneurship and innovation flourish, and then let the private sector and arm's length bodies get on with it. Farming, hospitality, and the creative industries have an importance well beyond their economic impact and need to be supported accordingly. I also have my 5-point plan for St. Saviour's, but I know that time is probably not going to allow me to talk about this today. So I really appreciate you listening, and I'd like to say thank you.
Good timing, Mary. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for yours. We're going to move straight away. And for those who have joined us, welcome. There's an opportunity for you to ask questions in the Q&A box at the bottom. And of course, this is being recorded and will be on the Jersey Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel. Let's move to our next candidate, Raluca. It's over to you. There are two screens at the moment, but the one that we can see you on is the one that we're going to be watching.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Raluca Kovac, and I'm standing for election because I'm eager and driven to make a positive contribution to St. Saviour and our island as a Reform Jersey candidate. I am British Romanian, living in the parish with my husband and our 2 young daughters, where we also run a popular restaurant in Howard Davis Park. The feedback and the words I've received for my community contribution in the last few years speak for my genuine passion and drive in helping others. This, together with my high-level qualifications in business, finances, management, accountancy, project management, my work experience and cultural awareness this has brought, will enable me to serve well the people of St. Saviour if elected. As a working mother with young children, I understand and experience firsthand the problem of our soaring cost of living, which, in my opinion, leads to many of the other problems our island is currently facing, because it's a vicious cycle. Together, we can break the cycle. And that's why, together with my Reform Jersey colleagues, I'm going to support propositions like increasing the minimum wage, progressive up to the living wage, removing GST on essential items like food, tackling the housing crisis by preventing investors from outside the island from buying homes in new developments, and ensuring the existing homes available for islanders are fit for purpose and secure, providing healthcare which is timely, high quality, available and affordable at the point of need for all ages, improve our education system and better support staff to allow all children to reach their full potential and provide better welfare and lifelong learning. And I'm family orientated with a strong work ethic, cultural awareness, and I've been told a lot of common sense. And if elected, I will work hard on your behalf to serve the parish's best interests. Reform Jersey stands for social and economic justice and has a clear program for positive change with measures that are tangible, deliverable, and affordable for a fairer society. Vote Raluca Kovac and vote Reform Jersey on 22nd. Thank you.
Thanks, Raluca. Thank you very much indeed. On to our next candidate, Philip Ozif.
Good morning, Murray, and good morning all those owners of businesses, the clients of businesses and the workers of business here in St. Saviour, which span all the economic interests of Jersey. We've got hotels, we've got infrastructure businesses, we've got farms, we've got financial services and digital services. You're all very welcome. I'm not going to repeat, if I may, what is already on the vote.je and the other websites for my manifesto. I stand as an independent candidate, not of a political party, and of course many members of the Chamber of Commerce will know that I was a States member for a long period of time, but I've been out of the States looking from the sidelines for the last 4 years. It's clear as I go round speaking to people and businesses in St. Saviour that there's a lot of catching up to do, there's a lot of speeding up to do, and there's a lot to get Jersey back on track. I'm hearing about serious problems of recruitment, serious issues and concerns about cost of living, which is not only affecting islanders in terms of individuals in their homes, but also businesses as they serve consumers. There is the ever-ending problem of housing issues. It was known about 4 years ago. It has got increasingly more difficult. And there's a constant refrain from businesses about the rising cost and time of the cost of red tape. The recruitment challenge, if I may address that directly, is an important issue. Politicians need to understand businesses need flexible labour markets. Brexit, housing shortages, COVID, supply chain issues, they've all are interlinked issues which have currently ended up with most businesses that I'm talking to not finding the workers that they need. There's a way to fix this. There's a way to fix it by changing the way that the work and housing law works, with permits and visas working in sync and making a more flexible approach and a lower cost approach to bring in workers.
Okay, Philip.
Of course, skills.
Going to stop your 2 minutes there. I'm
Thanks
afraid
very much.
we're going to run out of 2 minutes, and I want to be fair to everyone as best I can. Thank you for that. Thank you to Philip. We move next to Tom, who's on my screen, certainly the next one in line. So Tom Binet, over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. As I said in my speech at the parish hall, essentially I'm standing for election because I'm completely fed up with the way we've been governed, especially over the past 4 years. And apart from a few notable exceptions, I think the majority of our politicians haven't performed particularly well. By way of background, I've been in business since shortly after leaving school, and that's now some time ago, early 70s, principally in agriculture, and more recently in retail and servicing and property development. Nearly all of that has been in partnership with my sister Rose, who's also standing in the Grooville-St Martin district. Over the course of the last 40 odd years, we've had plenty of interaction with government, and I have to say the vast majority of it's not been easy. Our main business dealt with every major retailer in the UK, and against their very demanding standards, it's safe to say our government managed to prove even more problematic. So I understand there's much to be done to help Jersey business. The new electoral process has complicated matters in this election due to the removal of the office of Senator, a post which allowed candidates to put overall island issues at the centre of their campaigns. And I'd certainly look to address this in the event that I'm elected. So anyway, for my part, I've set out my stall pretty much on senatorial lines, and I'm just hoping that the voters of St Saviour will accept that for what it is. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, my first priority would be to do everything possible to restore proper ministerial control, and after that to sort out the many problems with the civil service. I think that's key to getting any decent policy through. If those things aren't right, then nothing else can be. As far as the key issues facing the island are concerned, I mean, they're very obvious. Everybody's spoken about them. It's the hospital, health service, housing, population, and a cost of living crisis that I think is going to become a hell of a lot worse over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. So I won't have time to cover my thoughts on all of these things in a 2-minute introduction, but hopefully I'll get the opportunity to expand on them during the course of the questions that follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move to our next candidate straight away to keep the ball rolling on this, and thanks for questions that are coming in the Q&A box at the bottom. Let's go to Kevin Pamplin next. Kevin.
Hi, Murray. Welcome, everybody. Pleasure to do this and say thank you to Chamber for everything you've done over the last couple of years. Sort of firsthand, I was, as people know, in the States for the last 4 years, mostly focused on scrutiny, so not in government. And as most people know, primarily focused on delivering changes in the world of mental health. But for a time, I was on the Economics Affairs Scrutiny panel as well, and before the pandemic. And we know the challenges now that people are feeling, and we have to get going pretty quickly. I think everybody's touched on the big issues that the island is facing right now, and they are the cost of living, housing, and of course the employment issue, which I know, speaking to small businesses in our parish and around the island, is still a big issue. One of our greatest advantages, I believe, is enterprising, and we can do more there to encourage young people and create career pathways for them, because that's one of the big issues as well facing the island. And we saw a little bit of a snapshot of that in the recent census about what are we going to do for the future of this island, and encourage our young islanders to create their businesses, to create their homes and their families here on the island. Because as everybody is also mentioning, not only is the cost of living and the cost of housing, meaning for some people it's impossible to get on the housing ladder, we're hearing now more and more people talking about that actually they can't afford to live here on the island itself. So there are many things to tackle, but we have to think positively. There are many challenges that we've overcome in the last couple of years. And I believe with the collective spirit and bringing people together, that's what they're looking for in the next State Assembly. And I'll seek to do my part, if elected, to support the parish, of course, and the island, and serve in whatever way possible to deliver those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And let's move to the final 2-minute roundup of the round robin that we've been doing with Lee Cornick.
Thank you, Murray. Good morning, everybody. My name's Lee Cornick, and as you're aware, I'm running for Deputy in St Saviour as an independent candidate, as I strongly oppose the new party system which is starting to take place here in Jersey. Now, we've all had a couple of tumultuous years, especially business. I work in the tourism industry and have seen the effect of a delayed response or a delayed decision from the Assembly and how it affects businesses all over, especially small ones. At the moment, it's difficult to recruit staff. The hoops that you have to jump through to get licenses and so on is absolutely unacceptable. We saw this coming. Also, the delayed response to kickstarting our tourism industry. Again, we saw this coming. You can't see so many airports and airlines laying off staff and then all of a sudden recruiting them for the same wage. We knew this was coming. We were unprepared to take advantage of the current travel situation. Jersey should have full books at the moment for most of its hotels, guest houses, visitor attractions, and hospitality outlets, and we don't. I think this is absolutely unacceptable. Personally, I believe in personal responsibility, freedom to make our own choices, freedom of speech, equality for everybody, and the values of integrity, dignity, and respect. Some things that seem to be lacking from the current State Assembly members sometimes. Talking to business owners, talking to the man and woman in the street, it's often blindingly obvious that the Assembly and the current politicians are completely out of touch with your average islander here in Jersey. At the moment, you know, it's frustrating to see how we haven't rebounded back properly yet from COVID. You know, we don't have policies that are fit for purpose. And at the moment, we really need to work on making this an affordable place for everybody to live who are born here in Jersey, and also to get staff from around the world and to see their needs as well, and actually to react to what they require and to what businesses require to bring people over here. And of course, we have to be aware that Jersey is a certain size. It only has a certain population and infrastructure to cope with that many people. But, you know, we are in a great place to move forward. And I believe our response so far has been quite slow in moving away from the pandemic. I'm sure you'll ask me questions to get more out of me later, but for now, that's about my 2 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks for going to time. And thank you to all of our candidates, and thank you to the people that have joined us as well. Just a reminder, this will be recorded and will be on the YouTube channel and going to all of our chamber members. Let's get into some of the subjects, because we've had a lot of the wishes. Let's have some of the how are we going to do it then. Let's talk first about one of the big issues for chamber members, which is the management of population. That, of course, feeds into recruitment, and that has an impact, and as very much an escalation of wage and costs for businesses. So population, we had the promise of a population strategy, a population policy, based on a population policy that was there for 4 years before and was going to be reviewed. It didn't arrive, and we still don't have a very clear population policy. And so I wondered, from the candidate's perspective, what your ideal population policy would be going forward to help businesses. And we'll start with that first. Tom, we're going to come to you first on this, if we may, and then we'll go to our other candidates. So population policy, Tom, how do we solve this problem?
And I'd be lying if I had a complete answer to this. It's a highly complicated one. We've got to face the fact that we've got a hospital that requires full-time nursing staff. We require specialists, doctors, people in construction. And at this point in time, there's no simple answer. But I think what we do have to do is be very selective about who we allow in, and have some sort of system that only brings in people as required. I mean, I have to say, the census actually gave me quite a surprise. I was expecting the island's population to have grown by more than it has. So for me, it's just perhaps a personal thing, but it doesn't seem to have been quite, the population growth itself in terms of incoming people doesn't seem to have been quite as wild as was anticipated. But like I say, at this point in time, I'm not coming up with any quick fix answers, other than the fact that to say that we have to have some control, well, as much control as possible, whilst allowing in the people that we do need to keep our essential services running.
All right, Tom, thank you for that. Mary, what do you make of it?
I can't really disagree too much with Tom. It makes a lot of sense there. I mean, when the census was done, we were expecting the population to have risen to 107,000, and we were, pleased that there was a bit of a downward trend and it was less, 103,000. Now, we would like to see this continue to grow, but we definitely recognise that we do need people to come in and work for our services, and that's why we actually have a shortage. So we do need a much more sophisticated system for controlling migration into the island. And I don't know why this has been so challenging and so difficult. I simply don't get it, because, Australia have a card system, and, it should always be linked to housing and employment. And if you've got a job, you should be welcomed into the island. You should be able to rent any sort of property, not buy any sort of property, but you should not be treated like a second-class citizen and be put up in non-qualified, substandard accommodation for double the average price that a JCAT licensed person would work for in Jersey. So there's lots to be done. I don't know why it actually hasn't been done. So, but we would certainly be striving as a party to really get a much more sophisticated system in control.
Thank you, Mary. Some people in business are now looking back at the regulation of undertakings as the good old days. At the time, they didn't so much see them as being such. Philip Ozef, you were around in those days. Maybe not what you wish to comment on, but certainly when it comes to population and population policy, where do you think we need to head?
Thank you very much, Murray. I agree fundamentally with the remarks that Tom has made about the critical shortage in a number of different areas. You're absolutely right, Murray. I was responsible for the new work and housing law, ditching the regulations of undertaking in the more difficult, challenging days. Politicians used to sit around a table and discuss whether or not a business should have a qualified person, one hairdresser versus another, I remember. We ditched that, and now we've got to focus on just the population controls, so just focusing on the under 5 years. But that isn't working because there isn't the supply of labour. This was foreseeable with the departure of Great Britain or the UK from the European Union, where effectively everybody, previously we had the flexibility of getting everybody from Europe, including the UK, into Jersey without a permit system. Now we have a permit system for everybody. And it's all very well for the Alliance-led government to say work permits are working. Well, the work permits that we've got at the moment are not working. This inability to have a person in the hospitality sector, a fisherman. I was talking to somebody in fishing this morning, to a construction worker. It's basically taking about 6 weeks to 2 months to identify a job vacancy and getting actually a physical person coming into Jersey. This is just not the flexible labour markets that we need. It needs to be fixed in terms of the work and housing law, which we do have linked in with the work permit system. It's possible to get this sorted. Skills identified by a skills council, which has been suggested by one candidate, Senator Moore, and more. We've had problems before, Murray. We can fix them again, but you need businesses to be able to speak to the states and the states members to listen to their challenges. But the challenges are acute.
Okay, thank you for that. Jonathan, I'm going to come to you on this population, big subject.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, there's many things we need to look at. The aging population is often something that gets forgotten, but you know, if we go net migration, that's going to be a very difficult future for Jersey. So we really do need to be measured, but grow our population to offset our aging population and the effects of that. Labour force participation, I think, is going to be crucial. We have one of the lowest labour force participation rates in the OECD. So that's, again, we need to look at how we can get people increase our labour force participation, and that will probably be looking at things like flexible working. So how do we promote flexible working more? I've been fortunate to attend a few Jersey finance roundtables as part of my role as a social value manager with a new business, and it's been enlightening to actually listen to some of the needs of industry and start to understand more acutely what the challenges are. And as you will expect, things pop up like housing. So we have a housing crisis basically. How do we start to resolve that? So there's no shortage of problems that we're facing in terms of our population. And ultimately, I feel that we as an island really need to drill down what we're doing with the aging population, because that's the future, and that's going to be setting a lot of our, it'll be set in stone. We need to ensure that we have the ability for hospital and home healthcare. I've had talks with family and carers nursing, and some of the issues they face is cost of living, so there's, I'm over time, but yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Lee, I'm going to come to you. You were last time around, so let's get you in the middle this time. Lee, population.
So lots of people have talked about the census. The census is already out of date. After speaking to Jersey's new chief statistician, we don't actually have people who are exiting Jersey included in those statistics. So there's actually, at this present time, there's no way of seeing who's moved off island permanently. Of course, it can come back in about a year or 2 years' time when we notice that they've not paid any social security or tax payments. But as such, at the moment, they're not registered. And I think if you ask anybody that you know, somebody knows a family that have either recently moved off of Jersey or are planning to relocate sometime soon. That affects all businesses. It affects us all because it leaves a skill shortage. Also, you know, for the population control, yes, we do need to keep a control over the amount of people that can have residency here. But also, you know, our temporary work permits aren't really fit for purpose either at the moment. It takes too long to process. They're not the correct duration for what businesses need. You know, they should be for 6 months to 2 years. That should be a no-brainer, I think. You know, that should be in there. And also, we should need to be treating our seasonal workers better. They should have access to health. We need to come up with a system where they can have access to the health. They're paying into our system. You know, we need to look after them better, and that way we will attract more staff to the islands at this time of need. Population growth at the moment, I think we're going to be surprised the next time that we properly investigate this. You know, I think it's going to be quite obvious soon that there's not as many people living on this island as we all think. I'm not talking about tens of thousands, but, you know, there will be a difference there. And it's something that the new Assembly really needs to get a grip of is, you know, the residency versus temporary time over here. You know, if it suits another person's purpose to come here and work for 2 years and move back to their own country, you know, the rate of exchange and so on, it suits them and it suits us.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Going to move to Raluca. Raluca, your thoughts on population?
As everyone said, we do need to control the amount of people that are coming in, but at the same time to take in consideration the shortage of lots of industries having staffing their businesses. We also have a small business, and we currently have the same challenges with staffing. My opinion is that we should celebrate and make use of our island cultural diversity and the varied skills this provides, and seize diversity as an opportunity and not as a burden. From the census results from last year, I'm aware that there are 4,500 people under 5 years residency on the island. From those, at least 2/3, I would say, are European, which we already granted them pre-settled status, so are here to stay, more or less. From my experience working with these communities, most of them are highly skilled in university degrees. We don't make use of those skills. We could use them more. We could invest in train local people and upskill them in the skill gaps part that we need. Also, a major issue is the minimum wage, which needs to be taken up to the living wage, the housing crisis. This would help retain the appropriate skills that are coming to the island to stay here, especially in the health sector. Most of the people I've spoken with, they said these are the major gaps because they have people coming here, they train them, but because of the increasing cost of living, they leave soon after. So then they have to retrain them and do the recruitment process again. I think if these aspects are all taken in consideration and take advantage of more of the local people we have and upskill them, and also make the work permits more suitable, as others have said, because the ones we have at the moment don't work for us. Also for the businesses, to look at the licensing system and allow people that actually are on the island already with pre-settle or under 5 years to be employable. That will also some.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Raluca. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Kevin Pamplin. Kevin, you've been sitting in the States for the last 4 years, so you've been observing the many conversations and taking part in some of them with regard to population policy. So where do you see it heading forward?
Well, I think the first point is we've got to look at the reality. So much we get caught up in the story of this in the last 20 years. In the last 10 years, net migration has been 3,300. If you go back to the period of 2001 to 2011, it was 6,800. So net migration has gone down. There's many reasons for that over the last 10 years: cost of living, the preemptive of Brexit, as Philip was mentioning, and all the other challenges. And actually, if you look at the same time period over the last 10 years, there's been a net loss of 3,600 Jersey residents. So an income of 3,300, net migration, and a loss of 3,600 Jersey residents. What I've seen over the last 4 years is we get caught in the rhetoric, but we need to just look and find the raw data. And then we need to encourage businesses and the people who know these figures better than anybody, the day-to-day running of their own businesses, to come forward with the reality. And we take that data and that reality and we put it into practice. For me, it's obvious. It's got to come down to education. We've got to create pathways and education opportunities to encourage entrepreneurship and ways into business that get young people involved in their island at an early stage that want to stay here. And then everything is interlinked. If we don't have the right wage structures, if we don't have the right housing mechanisms, and all these things in place, then people are not going to stay here and want to make Jersey their home. And then we're seeing the struggles that we face now. There's no getting away from it. This rise of inflation and everything else in the next few years is going to be a challenge. But if we're not listening and starting at a place of what the real data is instead of make up rhetoric, and we're not going to get anywhere. For me, that's what the answer is. We've got to look at our pathways of education and creating opportunities and entrepreneurships, but we need to listen more and bring people into the fold and not wait and talk and deliver. As Chamber and others have said, we need action now. And hopefully that will happen after the election.
Malcolm Ferry.
Yeah, hi. So Murray, you and I both sat in on the consultation for the licensing scheme, and we fed into that consultation and made very clear that 9 months was not sufficient for any business to be able to give surety to their staff and to be able to take themselves forward. What's coming across loud and clear from talking to the hospitality industry in particular is 2 years would be a far more usable licensing scheme period, because that gives people a reason to come here, a reason to work here for a set period of time, and then have a career path to move off somewhere else if that's what they need to do. Now, I think it's very easy to look at population and say we need to keep it down. There's a balance. A growing population is a healthy population as long as it's managed properly. It's not possible to have growth in the economy whilst population is going the other way. Guernsey has got huge problems with shrinking population. That's when an island starts to die. So how do we actually manage it in a proper, transparent way? And the way we do that is through an Australian style point system. And what that gives us is all the levers and valves to turn on the skills that we need for the jobs that are available. So it's a skills-based process. We attract the right people with the right skills for the right reasons, and it becomes part of a career path. Because a good employer grows its employees. A good employer doesn't see people as a commodity. It sees people as something to grow, something to have a really good experience in Jersey, and then take that elsewhere and talk up Jersey about it being a fantastic place to work, a fantastic place to do business. Productivity, of course, is closely linked to all of these issues, and we were long promised a productivity plan to link with increases in minimum wage. But businesses are having to innovate, they're having to digitalize, and productivity is very close to the overall work experience. So I just think we need a longer period of time for a licensing system in the interim, and then move to a proper thought out process of an Australian style point system that would work for Jersey and work for the people that are coming to Jersey. Murray.
Okay, thank you very much. We're not going to solve population in 2 days of doing this, let alone in the short time that we've got. And I'm sure there are many people who would have comments on what's been said and say, but, and I wish we could go and revisit those, but we can't. However, linked to that, and knowing that your voters are in your parish in St Saviour, and knowing that you are in I think the second most densely populated parish in the island, there is a challenge when it comes to housing and where housing should be. St Helier has shouldered the burden of that a great deal, and there is, of course, this big argument of building outwards or building upwards. So what is our direction for housing? Because population is directly linked to housing and housing to population and to recruitment. And again, businesses are saying to me day after day, even if they can recruit someone, even if they can get a license, there's nowhere to put staff. There's nowhere for anyone. And that is because the housing crisis that we've had is causing issues right the way down the line, from those that want to buy and live to those that want to come in and work. So how do we solve that, and where do we build? Is St. Saviour already full? Would you resist any further building in St. Saviour? Does St. Helier keep shouldering the burden, or do we look at other parishes? So a variety of questions there, but your thoughts on housing, I think, are really important. Forgive me for dropping on the first person that I think of on this, but I'm going to go to Kevin Pamplin first on this one today.
Thanks, Murray. Well, we recently saw this with the recent, what has been called the Bridging Island Plan. And we've got to go through that process again in 3 years' time. And that whole system, as we race towards the end of the parliamentary term, the whole thing was rushed. And what happens when you rush things? We had to make some quick decisions, and we had to make some real thoughtful decisions about how do we find that balance in St. Saviour's. You're right, we're the second densely populated area of the island. We had to find the balance of protecting green fields, and we achieved that. But we're going to have to do it again over the next 3 years. Amazingly, again, in the census, St. Saviour was the lowest on the table of population growth of the 12 parishes. And that's because we've been able to find the way to protect the balance between green fields. But that is going to be a challenge we've got to go through the next 3 years. We need a sensible and fair empty property tax. This has been long overdue. And we also need to find, again, it's policies to enable young people to access the housing ladder. We need to think about housing as homes, not commodities, and on all those things. We need to cut the red tape and the rhetoric to allow surplus states of Jersey land and properties to be insured for affordable long-term homes, not short-term measures, because that doesn't work. Possibly higher stamp duty on purchase of multiple properties, something that has been talked again over the last 4 years. And also we need to think about building for low energy consumption, which is going to be another big challenge over the next few years. There's a balance to be had. St. Saviour has definitely played its part. There's going to be a big operation going on over the Five Oaks areas and the work going on the St. Shen. But there needs to be a dose of reality. St. Saviour is doing as much as it can, and there's more to do. But when we had an island plan being rushed forward without a thought process about additional school needs, that we need a rethink on this. And I think now people have had enough and want to get on with these things. And St. Saviour will definitely play its part, but we can't burden islanders to living in concrete jungles as well.
I'm going to ask a supplementary of you as a sitting deputy, Kevin.
Yeah.
Was there a temptation for you to just vote down the Bridging Island Plan because you were being forced to rush something? So did you toy with that idea?
Yeah, I did very much so. In fact, I was, it's on record, it's on Hansard. I stood up many times that we were going into a Bridging Island Plan debate on the back of a pandemic. We don't know the real snapshot. The census was obviously done during the pandemic. It was helpful, but not complete in that sense. And then, of course, also when you think about, we didn't have that census data before we debated the Bridging Island Plan. And then when you think about the hospital, we do have another opportunity. That was the only thing that made me rethink, was we get to do it again in 3.5 years, so we can go back and do it again sensibly. And with people coming into the Assembly who've been on the outside, who have thrust us forward, got an opportunity to secure the things we should have done and did do last time round.
Okay. Forgive me for asking that second question. I just
no,
want to make clear you thought about voting against it, but you voted for it. But I just wanted to, yeah. Okay. Let's go to more thoughts on housing here. Tom, you in the development business, as you rightly pointed out at the beginning. So solving this conundrum of housing is another one of those, like population, really tough subject. But where do we go with this in relationship to St. Saviour?
Well, I'll tackle the wider problem first, if I may, and then we can come back to St. Saviour. And I may be about to say something that's completely wrong or controversial, but I think the first thing to do is quantify the problem, because I see a number of areas under development. There's a hell of a lot of properties being developed, and there are a hell of a lot more properties passed for development. And I know that I had a meeting with Ian Gullishaw from Andium. They've got a number of sites due to come through the pipeline. And I think the first thing we need to do is compare what the demand is to what's already either under construction or was passed for construction. And if you take the one from the other, then you realize what the sort of the end product is, or the end problem is likely to be. And it may not be perhaps as bad as we think. It's possible at the end of the housing crisis is almost in sight, if want of a better way of putting it. And as Lee rightly said, there are people leaving the island, and he said we all know people are leaving the island. I know somebody myself who I work with, I'm trying to persuade to stay here. So I just wonder if this constant search for new sites isn't perhaps slightly overblown. I also make the point that we've got 9% inflation. That's just for starters, and I think we're going to see that year on year for a number of years. And the market has got a way of correcting things, as I think we all know. And with the sort of demands that are coming up, sort of the people wanting to get on the housing ladder, that might shrink in and of itself, because people just won't be able to afford to pay for the property. So in overall terms, I think we just need to quantify what the problem is. In terms of looking for more sites, if more sites are required, I cannot understand for the life of me why planning don't allow greenhouse sites to be passed for development. They've been out of agriculture for a long time. People are used to seeing them built on. You've got greenhouses rotting away. And I think there's a sort of almost a jealousy that if somebody's been a greenhouse grower, they mustn't make any money out of it. They must be left for the greenhouses to rot while we take perfectly good fields and build on them. It's absolutely brainless. I don't understand that for the life of me. In terms of staff, you mentioned staff. I've had battles with planning for 30 years to allow me to build decent accommodation for staff, and there's still a lot of staff that I know living in poor accommodation, and I've taken the states to court, the planning department to court over this in the past, and they're absolutely obdurate. And for my money, that needs to change. If people want to employ staff, they've got to be properly housed, and we need permission to do that. Where St Saviour fits in all of that, I don't rightly know, but I think it obviously has to play its part in whatever way it needs to, in conjunction with every other parish. So that's all I'd have to say about that. So that's probably my 2 minutes, I think.
It probably is. Thank you, John. Jonathan Channing.
Yes, no, I mean, one of the things I'm very passionate about for the island as a whole, but also St Saviour particularly, is actually developing a green space pledge. So we can actually start to understand that, you know, if there is future construction, and, you know, that I don't think we can rule anything out at this stage, but it's done in line with actually a pledge to have access to green space and have green space available within the parish, because it's crucially important for the well-being of islanders. And we don't just want to be building accommodation, we want to be building homes. I also think there was some despair when, you know, obviously we all watched John Lefondre get a sledgehammer and start, you know, doing the ceremonial knocking down of Cyril and Markle House, which, you know, again could have been repurposed for accommodation. And we've got to get over this obsession of let's knock it down and rebuild it. Well, there will be some cases when we need to knock things down, like greenhouses that are no longer in use. But actually, sometimes we can keep things and we can improve upon them, and we can make use of the resources, make better use of the resources. And again, this you know, it happens with government. You know, government don't make good use of resources, which ultimately has led us to where we are.
Thank you, Jonathan. Malcolm Ferry.
Thank you, Murray. Yes, certainly releasing redundant commercial property owned by the government is one way that, you know, sites could be developed very sympathetically. If you look around St Helier alone, there are lots of state-owned properties dotted about that have done nothing for years and years. It's time to seriously look at those. But this is an island problem, and it has to be an island solution. So we're all for sympathetic development. I don't think anyone wants high rises. I think what we need to do is low rise where it fits in with the surrounding buildings, and keep the rural areas rural, and have that sympathetic development in the right places. But affordable housing starts with affordable renting. Because if people get stuck into the rent cycle, they will never be able to afford a property as hard as they save. So it's really important that we find as many opportunities for people who want to get on the housing ladder, and as many opportunities for people who want to have access to affordable renting as possible. For those that want to get onto the housing ladder, we are very much advocates of shared equity schemes, whereby there would be a shareholder, either the government or private enterprise, that would co-own that property, and ultimately that is a great way for people to get onto the property ladder. The downsides of it are we need to make sure that we're not creating a two-tier system. So the properties that people buy as their first-time accommodation have to be future-proofed, have to be good quality, and have to be sustainable for the future. Otherwise, people will get onto these schemes and find actually it's not the type of property that they really want to be living in, and then may not very easily be able to move on. Murray.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Malcolm, with his thoughts on population, we've got a couple of questions in that we'll come to in just a second. Raluca, over to you in terms of population and obviously St Saviour.
I don't think there are quick fixes to housing availability and affordability. However, we can make a start by preventing investors from outside the island to buying flats on new developments and ensuring that the existing ones are fit for purpose and secure. Reform Jersey has a housing crisis action plan put in place, which you can find in full details on our website. And from implementing those, I think it's a good start in tackling some of these problems. Like the propositions we have there to reserve more homes built by private developers to first-time buyers, which I know that Reform Jersey actually brought in the existing 15% reserve for that into place, because for 10 years it's only been discussions around it, and we don't have another 10 years to keep discussing about it. So we need to act upon it. The homes built on publicly owned land needs to be for affordable housing. We need to review existing development plans, like the ones from South Hill and Waterfront, to see how we can maximize the affordable homes there, instead of looking first time to keep building, see where we can extend. See on the private owners that are putting planning permissions to extend their housing, how we can support those. Also, I think there should be a right of first refusal for private tenants when landlords sell their home, and also support the scheme to purchase that property through shared equity. Making tenancy an open-ended by default would also help rental people have a security on long term. We should introduce a landlord licensing scheme and the regulation of letting agents. And we kept discussing about being so many empty properties that are empty for too long. So including the tax on those homes that are left empty for too long would be also a good step. And also Reform Jersey has got a proposition approved to look into this further.
Okay, Raluca, thank you for that. Lee Cornick, I'm coming to you next. Lee.
So I read recently, as I probably many of you did, in the JEP there are over 4,000 buildings currently empty here in Jersey. If we could be more flexible with our residential listed buildings, what we need to transfer those into different repurposing ideas, then we could start making quite a quick win at this already. Again, as Tom rightly said earlier, you know, we've got these greenhouse sites. You know, they're not bringing anything positive to our environment at this current time, and they're not going to in the future if they're not going to be used again as greenhouses. So yeah, we should be looking at using those and building on those areas as well, and making sure that we've got enough clear, environmentally sound green spaces around us for when we build these housing and accommodation. You know, we need to create communities as well around here. I think coming out of the COVID, we realized that staying in a 2-bedroom apartment with a family was very different to living in a house with a garden somewhere in one of the parishes where you've got lots of space to walk about in. And this is already a 2-tier housing system. You know, we're already living it anyway. So, you know, it's something that we do need to have a look at. I also think we maybe need to restructure how we do our affordable and social housing as well. The shared equity scheme is great, but it doesn't work for everybody. And what tends to happen is after a certain amount of time, the social and affordable housing will find its way onto the private market anyway, and then become fair game for investors who don't necessarily always live on the islands and find the different ways of getting into the property market over here. So yeah, very much it's something that we need to look at island-wide, especially here in St Saviour, but there are a few answers which I've given, and that's of some of my fellow candidates there as well.
Thank you, Lee. Mary.
Hello. I would like to take this whole question right back to St Saviour's to begin with, because I care about my parish, and I think it's really important how our parish looks and how our parish feels. Now, people in St Helier are unhappy with the level of building, but they have shops, they've got theatres, they've got art galleries, they've got a beach, they've got absolutely everything, and St Saviour's has nothing. And that's what I'd like to change. So I'm not saying never have building in my backyard. I'm not an NIMBY, but what I do want is very thoughtful planning and architecture. And what we really need, we don't have a dentist in the parish. We don't have a doctor in the parish. You know, we can't get to the shops. They're inaccessible at the moment. They're on a little strip on the busiest roads in the island. And that's simply not good enough for St Saviour. So if we're having something in St Saviour, I want a hub. Down at St Saviour's Hospital, I want another school down there because the kids can't get to school here in St Saviour, it's full. I want another school, I want a doctor's surgery, I want dentists, I want housing, apartments, and I want a green space for entertainment. We can have farmers markets, we can have craft fairs, we can have picnics. We have none of that sort of amenity space in this parish, and it has to change. I don't like, in planning terms, the way St Helier is lumped in with St Saviour. We're called Greater St Helier on the island plan. I mean, what an insult to people who live in St Saviour's. We have our own identity and our own feel, which I want to enhance. Now, from the housing perspective, you know, we do need more homes, and I recognise that. And I do think there's an awful lot of not apartment blocks, but office blocks in town, which they're not being used to the maximum capacity. I have spoken to the hospitality industry. They don't have enough accommodation for their staff. We can convert a lot of these into sort of 4 or 5 bedroom, large shared apartments for 2-year permit people, and they can come in and they would have a shared kitchen, a shared living room, but a proper bedroom en suite and nice wardrobes and stuff. And they're there for a short period of time and they move on, and that would create an awful lot of accommodation for the hospitality section. But we also want to build more houses, as the Alliance wants to build more houses, and we're going to hopefully build about 5,000 more houses by 2030. And we're going to do this by releasing up as much government land as we can. And we also want to have a shared, we want to have a scheme to help buyers get onto the property ladder. Most finance centres want 80% mortgages they will give them. So they have to find 20%, which is an awful lot of money for a young couple starting out for a home. So we want to help with a deposit system and make buying a home a possibility for young people.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. There's a lot to say on the subject. It's a very long way around the table, Philip Osif. And I remember conversations we were having about office blocks being repurposed, which I think has been happening over the last 4 years or so. What's your take on housing?
Well, thank you, Murray. It is great to see that the supply of housing in St Helier, we've got effectively a gentrification of St Helier as we're seeing offices moving down to the waterfront, and those offices, the traditional offices, basically being repurposed to housing. And I think the points that Tom make about data are really important. We need to update that information. What I don't understand, if I may say, is the comments from Mary. She's the party of government. She is saying that there isn't a doctor and a dentist in St Saviour, and we should have one. Can I just point out very politely, Mary, we do have that. It's a Hotel de France. We have a doctor, a dentist, a candlesticks maker, and all sorts of other things in St Saviour. It's there. Let's talk about what the realities of it is. And let's talk about the reality of an island plan that had two sites in St Saviour being brought forward. One which is on a three-corner site at the back of just by the old dairy site, that the government brought forward, and then a member of the Alliance Party then said we shouldn't build on it. That's not joined up. To be constructive, Murray, I've got 3 points. First of all, let's get the facts right, as we've just said. First of all, on a constructive side, let's use Locolit 2 going forward to relocate some of our brownfield industries that we've got in St Saviour. Some of those businesses that are building and other businesses, those sites, if they could be relocated down to Locolit, will free up some brownfield sites for development. Let's identify those sites that can be built on. There are some infill sites, only 1 or 2 that could bring some valuable supply side properties into the market. And the other issue is that we need to deal with the cost of building. That's making building more efficient, more eco-friendly, and more lower cost. Because frankly, one of the biggest problems is, as Tom said, there's lots of planning applications that have been approved, but you can't build it because we haven't got the materials and we haven't got the staff to build it. We need to reinvent the building structure and basically speed up the process of getting building built with maybe some prefabrication, looking at Northern European countries, for instance. But at least we've got fibre, by the way, to the homes. That's something that we did do in terms of infrastructure. The homes that we do have all got fibre, and that's one of the things, Murray, that you'll remember I'm very proud of having done with you and others.
All right, thank you for that. And Mary, I know you're desperate to come back, and I'm going to let you come back on this.
Thank you. I really need to correct Philip Osif here, because Hotel de France is on St Saviour's Road in St Helier. So you don't really know your parish very well, I'm afraid. And you keep going on about alliance-led government. I'm not in government, and I don't feel I should justify things for the last 4 years. We have 14 members of our party, 12 who have never even been elected. So I really begs, the comprehension. I really worry what's going on here. But obviously, I really know what's going on. But thank you.
Right.
We can't get a dentist in St Saviour? I think we can.
All righty. Okay. We'll leave the dental surgery where it is at the moment, but thank you very much indeed. Interesting debate as it is. Question that came in fact, there were 2 questions, and I think one of them we pretty much answered, which was a number of people mentioning the census. How accurate do candidates believe the census to be? And I think it was roundly agreed that the census was out of date the minute it came out. So I think that we can leave that one pretty much where it is, but we need more information. There was a question from Nigel who said almost all the candidates go on at length about the commitment to policies that involve more public expenditure, but never explain where the money is going to come from. Are they trying to bribe voters with their own money? Question mark. Nigel's shock should be the case that they should do it, and it would take an awful lot of it anyway. So when it comes to public expenditure, where's the money going to come from? It's a pretty good question. It's a basic question of economy, I think. So when we're talking about the economy and where we're talking about where money is going to come from, let's take that as our lead question to come from. Raluca, I'm going to come to you first on this. You're the representative here for the Reform Party. So let's hear where the money is going to come from.
So our manifesto, it's available on the Reform Jersey website. Yep. And what I can say for our 9 main pledges that we support to be implemented if elected, it's all fully costed already. Like everything that we've put in, we've done in consultation with the Treasury part, which already confirmed where the funds would come from some of those. Taking the living wage, for example, will raise the minimum wage to £10 starting with 1st of October. That doesn't bring any additional cost. With the housing crisis, that's been already. That doesn't bring.
Sorry, Raluca, I'm going to throw in the comment there that many businesses, I can almost hear in my ears saying that when you say there's no cost, of course there is a cost to businesses.
No, that's what I'm saying. There's no cost to the population, but there is already plan in support, and there is the funding where to support the small businesses from the existing business support plan, and that's going to be reallocated to enable them to have a slow introduction of this living wage that's all in plan already. With the housing crisis, this has been already put in a budget, and it's just redirecting the staff to work productively in in our housing crisis action plan. I mean,
Okay. I'm going to stop you there simply because we've got 10 minutes left and I need to get around every candidate. So, but thank you for the points that you've made on in terms of
one last line.
Sure.
The main part of the funding would come from restructuring reforming our tax policy or making the burden from low and middle earners taken to the higher earners, and that will bring about 50 million to our budget. And we'll also publish a full costing document soon to be available to look at.
Okay, thank you for that. Jonathan Channing, coming to you next.
Yes, no, it's a good question. And I think personally, a lot of my commitments and policies in my manifesto, they don't take a great deal of cost. You know, I look at things, how do we start redistributing some of that wealth? So one of the things I'm very keen on is a charitable contribution for high value residents. How do we get that money back into the community? How do we get it to start doing good in the community? I think, you know, things like the living wage, which I'm supportive of, but being measured and in line with industry, so a staged approach. That does also lift some people off needing income support potentially. So there's a saving there. You know, I think a lot of what I'm hoping to bring forward as a candidate is not necessarily looking at the costly stuff, but looking at how we can do things slightly differently, how we can inject some new thinking, and how actually that can really improve things. It's a reshuffle of the deck.
Okay, thank you. Reshuffle of the deck. Kevin Pamplin, coming to you. I'm conscious of time, want to make sure we finish on time, but that's just a reminder to every candidate. Kevin.
Yeah, sure. Well, the increasing cost of living is hurting islanders' businesses right now. So we need to look at the effective ways to increase the thresholds at which people start paying tax. We also need to be innovative and listen to things that businesses are saying, especially in state-owned buildings in St. Helier, for example. We've seen a very interesting report about the positive sides of what's happening in the town. So why don't we look at the big issue about high costs of rents in town, especially when we're talking about states property sounds as the town markets to enable enterprising ideas. You know, why don't we lower those rents and help the people where the state's buildings are working with businesses? There are many levers we can look at, and I think we're hearing, of course, about the impacts right now. So I just personally feel like that this needs to be a collaborative effort, but it has to come from businesses. We have to hear what they're saying. And I'm conscious of time, so that's my quick answer and thought.
Thank you very much. Quick answer, Lee Cornick. Where's the money coming from?
So already we generate a lot of tax money, a lot of tax and social security revenue here in Jersey. I don't think really that we are in a position where we can increase spending dramatically without borrowing. And that's something we certainly don't want to be entering into too heavily at this current climate. Obviously, any support you give to industry comes back to you. Everything we invest in that will boost our local economy, from tourism to agriculture. The more we export, the more money is coming into this island, the more money we have to not play with, but more money we have to recirculate. So that's immediately what jumps to my head, is that, you know, the key to success here is in the private sector, is in industry. It's all well and good saying that, you know, a living wage is required, but a business has to pay that living wage. You know, there's a knock-on effect. All you'll do is increase the cost of everything on island because businesses have to cover that cost. So if you have a living wage for everybody, it sounds like the humane thing to do. But I just don't think it's feasible at this moment in time. Maybe we need to look at more tax relief for those who are stuck in between the lowest earning and a human wage. That's where I would start.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Tom, coming to you next.
Right, yeah, I stand to be corrected, but I don't think I've made any pledges about anything that involves giving anything away for the sake of votes, but I do stand to be corrected. Maybe that because I've been in business, I understand these things perhaps a little better, but my whole approach has been about government efficiency. all of us have spent the last 10 years watching our government spend £100 million to get a planning permit for a hospital in the wrong place. Now, last time I sort of thought about it, £100 million can buy you quite a bit. And we've had that approach, it seems to me, particularly the last 4 years, to everything. Use of UK consultants, for example, another 800 people joining our civil service. These are the things that really need to be attended to. And to my mind, if we look at government like a business, we first of all make good use of the money we bring in before we look to anybody else. So that's sort of my standpoint on it.
Okay, thank you, Tom, and thanks for being brief on it. Philip Ozef, well, we could have a whole new programme about the hospital, but let's just talk about where the money's coming from.
I agree with the last speaker in terms of costs. Costs have risen massively over the last 4 years, which is a great concern because people are rightly asking, where is the money going to come from? We need to send clear messages. We need to go back to a system, if I may say, Murray, where we don't go year to year with a budget. We need to go back to 3-year budgeting, 3-year certainty in terms of the public finances law, which you can't actually get cost savings if you just simply go year to year. You have to tell departments, this is your budget over the next 3 to 4 years, and this is what we expect to do in terms of economy, and this is the extra money you're going to get to plan to do it. Also, all of the charities and the other third sector organisations, they can't operate on a year-to-year basis, whether that's Jersey Finance, Jersey Sport, or any of the other valued organisations that we do visit Jersey. I'm afraid that it does come from individuals. Yes, there are some changes on the tax system that need to be made. 0-10 is going to have to be widened, a widened area of 0-10. That wasn't possible when we were outside of the European Union. That's going to provide some revenue, with some businesses being asked to pay the 10% rate from the zero. I'm committed also to reducing the marginal rate of tax for individuals and also to amending the social security system so that it is not as aggressive. We need a social security free allowance. That should be paid for by the additional money that should come from amending the 0-10 amount. But government expenditure is out of control. We need to get back that into control. And the hospital, I'm really concerned the message has gone out that somehow that's a done deal. Maybe the planning permit's a done deal, but the contract signed on this crazy hilltop system is not at all done, and very unfair to candidates who found out about the hospital planning issue 3 days after we had to give our manifestos to vote.je. A crazy situation. It's like mushroom farming, keep them in the dark and give them a bit of information once in a while. It's not right. We need to change that. Transparent, open government with 3-year budgeting. Thank you, Murray.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Mary, coming to you, what do you think about this here, where the money is going to come from? Because we've got to balance everything.
We do indeed, and I don't actually disagree with Philip about the 3-year budgeting. You might be pleased to hear. But we do know that the revenue that comes in at the moment stands at about £998 million per year. We do have to make efficiencies. We do have to make sure that we can continue to pay £228 million on health and community services, £476 million on social benefits, including £77 million income support and the remaining on pensions, incapacity allowance, long-term care benefits, health benefits, COVID-related benefits, which are ongoing, and education and other allowances and student grants. And then also, not to mention, with putting children first, which has been very at the forefront of people's thoughts, 157 million on children, young people, education and skills. Now, this year, the government did actually have a surplus of 59 million. And if that's carefully used, it can also use to enhance the services that we need. For instance, our dental health policy, which I'm particularly keen about, it should be able to pay for that well in excess of paying for that, as long as with other things. But the most important thing is that we keep our taxes low, broad and fair, and we have a vibrant economy to keep everything working very well.
I knew you'd get there in the end. Thank you, Mary. Last word is with Malcolm Ferry. Malcolm Ferry, where's the money going to come from?
Thank you, Murray. So the question was about public expenditure, and some candidates have started to actually answer that. So, you know, we're for not taking on more debt without a clear repayment plan, because all we're going to do if we don't do that is saddle future generations with a massive debt. So we are all for restoring financial prudence within government. No more expensive consultants. We can grow our own talent, It's far more economically viable to do that than to have consultants who come over for short periods of time and take massive amount of money. In relation to the hospital, yes, we agree it's too expensive, it's in the wrong place, but whatever happens, the budget needs to be tightly controlled so that we get a good hospital which is fit for purpose and fit for Jersey's needs. In relation to whether it's 3 or 5 year budgeting, I think whatever it is, non-profit organisations need to sync with that budgeting, because in the past where I've worked at Citizens Advice, there was 3 year budgeting. My budgeting was on a yearly basis. So whatever we end up with, organisations and arm's length organisations that rely on government money should also sync with that time frame. Murray.
Malcolm, thank you very much indeed. Finishing bang on time. Here we are at 10:15. This has been the Jersey Chamber of Commerce. Oh, hello.
Can I take just a second to reply to the cost of living mentioned before?
No, but thank you for asking, because it is 11:15. I've tried to get it to as much as I would like to, Relika, and I really would. But we will hear more from other reform candidates. In fact, in the next one in 14 minutes' time, and I'm sure that will come up during that, because that will be St. Brelard. And I'm sure there's a reform candidate there who will have plenty to say about that. Thank you very much indeed to all of our candidates for giving their time this morning. Thank you to those who've been watching and to those who will be watching it on Catch Up once it is on our YouTube channel. It's the first of them. I wish each and every of our candidates the very best of luck in the forthcoming election. Thank you for your time today. And I wish you all well from the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting, Murray.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.